Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Joseph Clough, and this is episode 894. Now, in today's episode, we're talking about how to reduce and reframe anxiety as it's happening, which once you start to apply, will cause your brain to learn how to do it by itself. And that means you don't have to do it anymore. So that's the good news. But if you start to practice this, what I'm about to tell you today, your unconscious mind will assume that new strategy. So when in the past you may have been triggered, which created anxiety, this way your unconscious mind will be triggered to be calm and relaxed and reframe it effortlessly and easy. That is our plan, that is our outcome, and that is what we plan to do today. So first of all, let's just quickly talk about it, just the brief part of it. Anxiety is you thinking of all the things which could happen in a very overwhelming way, which makes you feel anxious, worried, and fearful, self-doubt, and all those things. And it has obviously a physical effect on your body. You may start to feel your heart racing, or you have that kind of dread on the inside, that panic. And that's not good for the body. So we want to be able to teach the body, and by the body, I mean the unconscious mind, because if you could let go of your anxiety, you'd just click your fingers and you'd stop. But if you cannot do it consciously, it must mean the unconscious, or some may say the subconscious, doesn't really matter to me, but that part of the brain is running the anxiety. And we can go into all the how it happened, why it happens in terms of your past history, in terms of traumas or significant emotional events that we've gone through, which makes us feel this feeling. But what I want to do is less worry about the why and worry about, well, how can I make this change? Like, what can I do? Some people, and it's not bad about these other therapies because they're designed that way, and it's all good for many people, talk and talk and talk. But sometimes just talking about it doesn't solve it because the unconscious mind hasn't got the necessary tools. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And if you're listening to this and you're experiencing anxiety, maybe you've done those things and maybe it just didn't work for you, and maybe this will. So we know what it is, anxiety. We know almost the how that the unconscious mind is trying to protect you in some way of all the worst case scenarios. It's almost as if like your unconscious mind is a superhero jumping to every anxious thought, thinking, how do I solve this? What if this happens? Like just at every leap and bound trying to protect you. So we can be at least thankful for the intention, right? So send a little signal to your unconscious mind. Go, look, even though I don't like it, I am thankful that my unconscious mind is trying to protect me. And I say try because try really comes from tried, and tried really means a failure or not doing so, or not fulfilling a certain objective. So let's be at peace that your unconscious mind's trying to protect you. So here's how we get into the how. Like, what are we actually going to be doing to be able to reduce, diminish, let go, reframe anxiety? Because very, very quickly, actually, anxiety is a generalization. It's a distortion. You are deleting aspects of your filtered reality. So you're distorting and generalizing and deleting aspects, which makes us feel worse. So number one thing, what I always tend to do is to empty out my anxiety. Now, what I mean by emptying out is to get clear on the worst case scenarios. And it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but the more you're able to empty out, and just even like if you think it or write it consciously, it means your unconscious mind doesn't have to think about it because you've emptied out all the potentialities. So that is one way, and you could call it being very stoic, being at peace, but yeah, all of these things could happen. But when you get to that emptying out, all these things could happen, it kind of gets your brain into, well, the chances are it's not going to happen. Like, I've recognized all the things which could happen, because you haven't just let it kind of store and get kind of like store in your unconscious and just run wild, you've let it out, you've emptied it, and then your brain kind of goes into a reset and goes, what's real here? Like, what is the likelihood of all these things happening, or even sometimes one thing happening? So that is one aspect that you can reframe anxiety, by literally going into what could happen, and then your unconscious mind begins to decipher that actually the chances are nothing's going to happen. Like, the worst case is really, really, rarely ever going to happen to you. But if it's stored at an unconscious mind, you have that dread that something could happen. So it's almost like you're becoming at peace with the potential negatives, that it doesn't actually bother you. And then what I do is I add on to this, so it's not necessarily a part of this topic, but once I've come up with all the potentialities and just got them out of my head, emptied my cup, see it for what it is, I then just ask, how would I like it to have happened? How would I like my day or that situation to happen? Because usually we tend to go into a state of all the whys are going to happen, which gives you reasons to be anxious. But if you change your wording, like, how am I going to be, or how would I like to be, you're now creating images in your mind in the best possible positive viewpoint. You're going, well, let's just say, for example, you had anxiety about approaching someone who you think, yeah, they're a real nice person, I'd like to ask them out on a date. Usually you go, what if they reject me? What if this happens? But if you go, well, how can I walk up confidently? Your brain is designed to seek out that strategy. But if you go, like, say, same thing for promotions or job interviews. If you go, why am I like this? Why do I feel anxiety? It will look for all the evidence in your past. But if you go, well, how would I like this meeting to go? You are creating a positive visualization, which causes your unconscious mind to have to go there, which sneakily pre-teaches the unconscious mind to go, this is a possibility. So change the whys to the how. How can I go into this situation confidently? How would I like to? And your brain will go there. There's so many studies on that. Like, we've talked about that plenty of times. The studies of going there in your mind, your body goes there too, and it pre-teaches the unconscious mind. But the main first thing was emptying out until it becomes ridiculous, that your unconscious mind resets and becomes more at peace with the situation. Let's go ahead into the real aspect of the reframing, which is going to be two aspects. And the two aspects are broken into two sections as well. So number one, anxiety is that you're so kind of in the feeling of that moment of thinking what could happen in the very near future. It doesn't make you feel good. So what I tend to do is switch things up. I consider the timeline of life. Like, if I think about going way back, maybe a year or two back, thinking, well, what does this anxiety mean to me when I was looking through the eyes of me 2 years ago? Then I can do the same thing in the future. If I think about what's going to happen in 2 years, does this thing really matter? Like, in 2 years' time, will that me really be bothered about it? And you might go, well, yes, a little bit, but there may be a diminishing. So what you're doing is you're changing the timeline of your experience. You go out into the future or you go out into the past. They're the two sections in this case, the future and the past, that it starts to diminish that energy. And you'll notice the further you go, the smaller the anxiety is, because it becomes more meaningless. And what I mean by that, let's just imagine if you zoomed out further. Let's go way back first. Let's go down that scenario. If you go all the way back to your baby, does it really matter? Probably not. If you go way back, even before your time. So imagine going 100, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. It doesn't really, if you look back from that perspective, this thing doesn't really matter as much. And if we go off into the future, End of our life. Does it really matter? Probably not. We're probably thinking about all the things we've did or the things we want to do, that this one part of anxiety is just meaningless. But as I said, if you go further, what's this anxiety thought going to really matter once we've passed? Like hundreds of years into the future. I know it's a bit weird thinking that way, but if you do really go far enough into the past or the future, the anxiety just seems to start to diminish. And like I said, if you do this as and when it happens, it reframes the anxiety to meaningless, and therefore your brain will start to do this automatically by itself. But I also said there's another option. So if you think about the past and the future, well, how else can we start to do this in a more curious way, a creative way? Well, we have the micro and the macro. So for example, let's just say the first ones were like very past and present. Well, now let's go into the present, and now just imagine zooming out maybe to the point of the earth. So you're just looking back at the earth, that beautiful blue marble. We've zoomed out so far. How does your anxiety to compare zooming out from that level? Not just like above your city or your state or your country or your continent. You go so far out, looking back at you down there, which you can't even see that you. On that grand scheme, it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't have as much energy. Now, we can go into the micro. So if we begin to zoom all the way down to the size of a bug, a size of smaller than that, into atoms, the issue also doesn't tend to stick as much. Like it at the real quantum level, if you go down the real extreme, when you go into the pure vibration of energy, or if you look through the eyes of maybe that insect, they're probably thinking, well, this issue is not that bad considering this viewpoint. And of course, we can go back to the macro, the bigger. So we said about looking at that beautiful blue marble of our Earth, Gaia, and then just imagine going further back. Imagine if you go from the viewpoint of the solar system. So we got all the planets in the solar system. You cannot put your attention and energy on that issue that you're experiencing with anxiety because you're that zoomed out. Like it can't hold its ground. But let's go even beyond our universe, like the Milky Way and beyond. Think about it. If you ever see those pictures from space, or from the, you know, when they bring back the pictures of like the origin of the universe and like the creation of planets. Like if you were to figure out where we are somewhere in terms of the grandest, biggest thing that we ever know, how does the anxiety hold up? Now, for some people go, oh, that's a bit anxious because I'm thinking about the whole universe. But in the context of the anxiety that you're triggered in, it diminishes. So ultimately, if you start to go into the future, the further you go, or into the past, the further you go back, the meaningless or the anxiety becomes more meaningless based on time. I mean, they say like time's a healer, right? So different context, but it still means the same thing. That the more you go beyond that present moment of the anxiety, it ceases to really live anymore. And the more you do that, it will interrupt the pattern. Same thing with the micro and the macro. Zooming all the way down or all the way out. I like the all the way out one because when you kind of just consider everything, it's like this, I don't need this anymore. And of course, the first thing I said, which was just emptying out. Just empty out, become conscious of all the worst case scenarios, and after a while you become, in a good way, exhausted. The brain goes, reset, let's think of another approach, and then you can go into, well, how would I like to be? So if you start to apply any one of those strategies, I know if you do it with time, like it takes a number of times to do this, But if you start to do it consistently, you're almost handing it off to your unconscious mind that this is the new strategy, that this is how I'm going to operate. And then your unconscious mind goes, this is different from the old strategy of anxiety, which didn't make me feel good. This new way is more stoic in nature, more peaceful, more considering of perspective. And that's what it really is changing our frame of reference, our perception, which then changes our projection of how we operate into the world. So your unconscious mind, which runs the issue, will start to take it on. So that means that when it happens in the future, that old trigger, your unconscious mind will, quick like lightning, go zoom all the way out, all the way in, all the way out to the future, all the way out to the past, and empty out quicker than you could ever imagine, come up with the how would I like to be. Your unconscious mind will just assume it. Why? Because your unconscious mind is here to protect you, right? We said right at the beginning, have a little thanks to your unconscious mind because it's trying to protect you. So if we offer this new strategy of reframing anxiety in a certain way, it will allow you to be safer. And therefore, your unconscious mind will upgrade from the present anxiety process to this new one, because it is here to protect us in every single way. So I hope you enjoyed this shorter episode, mixing it up a little bit today. But I thought we could just kind of do it real quick and simple. Now, of course, you got to assume responsibility, take action on your desires, all the usual things I say. But I just wanted to give you ultimately 3 ways of emptying out, going through the future and the past, to the micro to the macro, of the massive to the small, all of those things. It will start to interrupt the pattern of anxiety. And once you do that, it's like a CD. That if you remember the CDs or records and all those things, it's been playing this anxiety strategy, this song, this album consistently. Now we're interrupting it. We're kind of scratching it a little bit. So therefore it can never be played again in the same way. And it'll start to begin to sing from this new tune of reflection, reframing, and really reclaiming the power over your mind and be free of anxiety. And of course, listen to the hypnosis. We've got sleep sessions, we've got day sessions, morning meditations, all on the app. You can go ahead and just get it at freehypnosis.app. If you go into the free section or the hypnosis section, you can just type in, say, anxiety, and it's going to come up with some tracks or topics which are going to support you through this. My whole work is honestly trying to help as many people as possible. That is what I'm trying to do. I know what it feels like to be there. I know what it's like to be out of it and have my life pretty much how I'd like. I mean, I always want to improve. I've got to improve with a higher standard sometimes of how I want to be. But my goal and outcome is to be able to help as many people as possible. And if you want to help me with that, you can become a subscriber. It just means I keep on evolving the app. And also on top of that, leave a review, because your words count. You never know that your words could inspire someone to make the change, which creates the ripple throughout their family, their future, healing their past, to be able to live a life that we all kind of like living in the world that we'd all like to be a part of. Wouldn't that be nice? But we just live in a world we all want to be a part of, a team, a family. And we need that more than ever. So I appreciate if you ever get the time to leave a review. So with that, my friends, I look forward to speaking to you on the next episode, which is going to be a meditation on self-love. And those who are subscribers and supporting me in the app, you're going to get a sleep version of that as well. And yeah, let's have some fun. Let's do what has to be done. And I'll speak to you on a future episode. Many thanks and goodbye.